Welcome to Crosspointe.
Welcome to Crosspointe.
Welcome to Crosspointe.
We are an inclusive faith community
seeking to live out the loving, just, and generous way of Jesus.
We are participants in a long tradition
that's less concerned with doctrines and dogma that demand total agreement,
but a life to be lived, enjoyed, and given away to others.
What unites us is a growing awareness that life is precious.
That we are made by love in order to love.
This community is comprised of and affirms the entire human family.
Regardless of race, age, creed,
physical abilities, marital or economic status,
gender identity, or sexual orientation.
So, if you're curious and have come to see,
if you are tired and have come to rest,
if you are grateful and have come to share,
if you are wounded and have come to heal,
if you're joyful and have come to celebrate,
if you are uprooted and have come to belong,
welcome home.
Welcome home.
Welcome home.
Welcome home.
matter how you run from change, or you can stay the same. No matter how you use the stage, no matter if you ravage and rage, no matter comfort, no matter pain, all you can stay the same. And I hope you come and see me after all the years, 'cause I don't know where we're going, but we can't stay here. Oh, no matter how you roll the dice, no matter if you pay the price, no matter where you take your aim, all you can stay the same. And I hope you come and see me after all the years, when it's all behind the sand, there's nothing left to fear. Oh, when it's all behind the sand, there's nothing left to fear. When it's all behind the sand, there's nothing left to fear. No matter where you pitch your tent, no matter how you pay the rent, no matter where you lay the blame, all you can stay the same. All you can stay the same.
Good morning, Crosspointe. Got a couple of announcements for you this morning. First of all, next Sunday, August 27th, we're having our annual church-wide summer block party. It's right after church in the back lawn, and we're gonna have live music, inflatables, one to get you a little wet since it's gonna be so hot, and another one that's dry, some yard games, some field games, lots of fun for everyone. And in addition, there will be food trucks there available for you to purchase lunch. So we hope you'll join us next Sunday, August 27th, right after church behind Crosspointe. Then the following Sunday, so 2 Sundays from today, September 3rd, that's Labor Day weekend, we will not be meeting in person on that Sunday morning. Lots of you will be out of town, you may have people in town visiting you, or it might just be a good day to stay in your jammies. But either way, we'll have the online service available for you, but we will not be meeting in person that Sunday, 2 weeks from today, September 3rd. There are so many things that we do together in the life of our church. And one of the ways that we partner with each other is through our finances. If you want to find out more about how to do that, you can go to crosspointe.org/contribute or text crosspointenc to 77977. Thanks so much for joining us today. Hope you have a great week.
Hi. The passage I've chosen to look at today comes from the book of Ezekiel, chapter 37. And rather than have me read it all, there is a creative reading and video that we're going to use instead. So I invite you to watch and to listen.
The Lord took hold of me, and I was carried away by the Spirit of the Lord to a valley filled with bones. He led me all around among the bones that covered the valley floor. They were scattered everywhere across the ground and were completely dried out. Then he asked me, "Son of man, can these bones become living people again?" "O sovereign Lord," I replied, "you alone know the answer to that." Then he said to me, "Speak a prophetic message to these bones and say, 'Dry bones, listen to the word of the Lord. This is what the sovereign Lord says. Look, I am going to put breath into you and make you live again. I will put flesh and muscles on you and cover you with skin. I will put breath into you and you will come to life. Then you will know that I am the Lord.'" So I spoke this message just as he told me. Suddenly, as I spoke, there was a rattling noise all across the valley. The bones of each body came together and attached themselves as complete skeletons. Then as I watched, muscles and flesh formed over the bones. The skin formed to cover their bodies, but they still had no breath in them. Then he said to me, "Speak a prophetic message to the winds, Son of Man. Speak a prophetic message and say, 'This is what the sovereign Lord says. Come, O breath from the four winds, breathe into these dead bodies so they may live again.' So I spoke the message as he commanded me, and breath came into their bodies. They all came to life and stood up on their feet, a great army. Then he said to me, 'Son of man, these bones represent the people of Israel. They are saying, we have become old, dry bones. All hope is gone. Our nation is finished. Therefore prophesy to them and say, this is what the sovereign Lord says. O my people, I will open your graves of exile and cause you to rise again. Then I will bring you back to the land of Israel. When this happens, O my people, you will know that I am the Lord. I will put my spirit in you, and you will live again, and return home to your own land. Then you will know that I, the Lord, have spoken, and I have done what I said. Yes, the Lord has spoken.
Now, if you were to take away the beautiful imagery in this video, the text underneath is quite jarring. The speaker here is the prophet Ezekiel. And before we talk about Ezekiel specifically, let's discuss a little bit about ancient Hebrew prophets in general. Prophets were women or men who functioned as types of spokespeople or intermediaries for the divine. And in the case of the prophets recorded in the Bible, that would be intermediaries for Yahweh. Prophets received divine messages, sometimes by vision or audible voice, and then they were required to get their message across in a lot of interesting, sometimes bizarre and disturbing ways. Prophets were not fortune tellers. They were not predictors of the future, except for the fact that you might know that what God said would happen typically ended up coming true. And prophets really just were telling people that there were inevitable natural consequences to their poor choices and behaviors. Prophets actually couldn't hold the title of prophet unless society determined that they were one. So in other words, just like today, anyone can claim anything they want and declare it to be true, but not everyone who claimed to be a prophet was one. And the community was in charge of the vetting. And like today, I'm sure sometimes the community got it wrong, but we can rest assured that prophetic books we consider sacred text today were at some time considered authoritative by a large enough community that they made it into our sacred canon. Now, if you've ever tried to read prophetic literature or listen to it as we did today, it can be at times both beautiful and really difficult to understand. Prophetic timelines are messy. Chronological order has been lost to history sometimes, which means that sometimes multiple prophecies get lumped together and can be difficult to untangle. Some of the collected ancient texts also include prophecies not written by the original prophets, but by followers of the prophets who wrote under pseudonyms of the original prophet. And just like a lot of us preachers and parents, prophets could get long-winded when they had a lesson to impart, most of them starting with criticism and caution and doom. And probably the prophet's voice eventually sounded to some like blah, blah, blah doom, blah, blah, blah bad. And people would tune them out before they ever got to the hopeful bits. We, at least, get the privilege of having the text and being able to shut the book when it all becomes way too much to digest. That's not to say that prophetic literature is not interesting reading. In between the poetry of consequences and redemption are these stories of extreme measures prophets used to get their message across. They used language bathed in urgency and shock. They practiced startling, attention-grabbing behavior. The prophet Isaiah walked around naked. The prophet Jeremiah hid his underwear under a rock for a while and wore a cattle yoke around his neck. He did a lot of other crazy things too. Our prophet Ezekiel ate a scroll, baked barley cakes over cow manure, lay down on his side for 390 days with an iron pan next to him. He shaved off his beard with a sword. He sewed some of that beard hair into his clothing. He caught some of it on fire. And of course, he was known for his very vivid visions. Prophets used extreme tactics because they lived in times that called for urgent messaging and urgent action. Often, the communities were stuck, sometimes quite literally in their location, like the Israelites in exile, but also stuck in their behaviors, in their misguided thinking, in their apathy, in their hopelessness and despair, in their cycles. Ezekiel, like much prophetic literature, was written during the time when the Israelite community was divided. They had been conquered. They had been exiled from their home. It was a community literally torn in two. Those who'd been exiled to Babylon and those who had to remain in Judah. The fracture meant that this community was threatened with a loss of communal and religious and likely personal identities. Ezekiel was in exile himself, and he was a prophet to both those who were exiled to Babylon and those who remained in Judah. He had a foot in both worlds. And he wasn't only their prophet, he was their kin. He not only deeply understood them, he felt responsibility for them. Prophets, Ezekiel included, called upon communities and individuals to look at the world differently, to confront the uncomfortable, to honestly examine reality, and then to imagine the way things could be. And multiple millennia later, we can use the ancient text to imagine the same, the way the world could be. Our text today, it's an account of one of Ezekiel's more extreme visions, one where Yahweh asks this crazy but really important question: can these dry bones live? Really, this vision is worthy of a Netflix documentary about the field of the long dead who suddenly found themselves questioning what they might have for dinner. And I have to say, it would be dishonest not to stop here and tell you that I personally have an irrational fear of the zombies, the undead. And I understand that they are not truly real. But a large part of me believes that they could be, and that in fact they might be someday. I just hold that really carefully in the back of my mind. And I can only guess that my fear stems maybe from my baby brother forcing me to watch all manner of zombie movies with him when I was young, like 1968 Night of the Living Dead, 1978 Dawn of the Dead. He didn't deal with the recent trash, but I watched them with him as a child. And today, I still actually try to stay far away from anything that could possibly have the living dead in it. And all of you Walking Dead fans, don't come to me with all this stuff about that show not being about zombies. I've heard it all before. I don't care what you call them. I want no part of it. And just a little bit more insight into how ridiculous my fear is. Not long after I came to work at Crosspointe, a little more than 8 years ago, the staff participated in some team building at an escape room. Fun, right? Yeah, except I wasn't given all the details, nor should I have been. The main point of this particular escape room was that there was a live woman, or an undead woman in this case, dressed as a zombie, chained in the center of the room. And in the midst of finding clues and solving puzzles in order to get out of this locked room, there was a zombie trying to continually touch and kill you. And every 5 minutes or so, her especially rattly chain would be released a little bit, and her bloody mouth would get a little bit closer, and her rotten reach would get a little bit longer. And now, as the time I was the newest Crosspointe team member, and I wasn't ready to reveal my weaknesses to my coworkers, and I found myself standing literally in one of my worst nightmares. But I don't think anyone recognized my agony. Needless to say, I was completely useless as a puzzle solver, probably why I've never been invited back to a game room, but please give me another chance. I'll do better without the zombie. Also, I found out a lot about myself. I realized, on some logical level that fight was not the best choice in the fight or flight options I was feeling. So instead, I spent most of my time in a corner trying not to be touched by the very convincing zombie lady. I think everybody else pretty much just ignored her. I had one eye on her at all times. And after what seemed like weeks of resistance, I eventually gave in to the inevitable and sacrificed myself for the good of the team and allowed myself to be killed by the zombie. And just to put your wild imaginations at rest, that just meant she touched my leg. Although in my mind, she might as well have just bitten the whole thing off. And just for the record, if there ever is a real zombie apocalypse, after hiding my children and kissing my husband goodbye, you will find me simply lying down in front of all the zombies to get the inevitable over with. This is my fear, and that's likely TMI. But you can imagine that, for me, this particular passage of the resurrected dead has a little bit more context. And you might ask yourself, Tirza, why did you choose to talk on this passage today? No one forced you to. Your baby brother is not here. Fair point. But I have to say that in the midst of the bizarre, underneath all the craziness, I find this passage strangely beautiful because it's not about the walking dead. It's about the possibility of true and full resurrection. The walking dead are only half alive. And that's not what this is talking about. What was once dead is not simply walking dead. It was fully alive with rosy cheeks and hot breath and feet and legs that could walk and run and dance. Ezekiel envisioned Yahweh walking with him to a valley of bones. The bones were likely left from a past battle. They had not had a proper burial, and despite Jewish law forbidding contact with the dead to avoid contamination, Yahweh encourages Ezekiel to walk among the thousands and thousands of abandoned, forgotten bones as far as the eye can see. And the language suggests that the bones were so dry, so devoid of living scent that the dogs were not even sniffing at them anymore. Birds no longer circled. Desert creatures now made homes in their shadows, which had become nothing more than a part of the landscape. The bones were in such a condition that what was about to happen could not be confused with resuscitation. It was resurrection. It was new life. And this is what Ezekiel 37 says. Yahweh asks Ezekiel, mortal, person who would also one day be just like these bones, Yahweh says, can these bones live? And I, Ezekiel, answered, Lord, you know, which is probably the best answer to that question. Then he said to me, this is Yahweh talking to Ezekiel, prophesy to these bones. Say to them, O dry bones, hear the word of the Lord. Thus says the Lord God to these bones, I will cause breath to enter you, and you shall live. I will lay sinews on you, and will cause flesh to come upon you, and to cover you with skin, and to put breath in you. And you shall live, and you will know that I'm the Lord. Suddenly there was a noise, a rattling, and the bones came together, bone to its bone. And I looked, and there were sinews on them, and flesh had come upon them, and skin had covered them, but there was no breath in them. And that's the question. Can these dry bones live? The resurrection of these bones happened in 3 stages. First, there's the sound of the thousands of bones rattling, finding their partners, connecting as they move to form complete human skeletons. Can you imagine that sound? Can you imagine that sight? A neighborhood, a village, a city of skeletons where there had once just been scattered bones on the earth. Next, the skeletons were transformed with sinews, muscle, flesh, skin, and anyone watching was probably grabbing their valuables and putting on their running shoes. Can you imagine it? Bones and muscles and skin, and the question is still, but can these dry bones live? Because still, the now bodies did not have life. Just because they looked alive didn't mean they were. And what happened next was reminiscent of the first human breath in the creation story. From the very first chapter of the very first book of the Bible, Genesis, it says that from dirt and dust and clay, God creates humanity, Adam. How does that happen? God gives them breath. This word, ruach. This can be also translated as spirit. Not just spirit as in the spirit of humanity or a soul and life. Ruach is the word used to describe God's essence, God's spirit as they moved across the face of the earth, giving life, breathing life into plant and animal and atmosphere and human. And when it was time, God breathed God's self into the human body. And the essence of God created life and humanity. God's essence was in humanity. This is the same ruach that Ezekiel calls to breathe into the once dry, cracking bones. And this is what Yahweh commanded Ezekiel to prophesy the second time. Then he, God, Yahweh, said to me, Ezekiel, prophesy to the breath, prophesy, mortal, human, and say to the breath, thus says the Lord God, come from the four winds, O breath, and breathe upon these slain that they may live. So I prophesied as he commanded me, and the breath came into them, and they lived and stood on their feet, a vast multitude. Now, these particular bones in this prophecy represented Ezekiel's own people, who in their exile and their pain had been crying out, our bones are dried up, our hope is lost, we are cut off, separated, expelled, excluded from all that we know completely. And Yahweh tells these resurrected bodies, this representation of the people, I'm going to open your graves and bring you up from your graves. O my people, I will bring you back to the land of Israel. And you shall know that I'm the Lord. When I open your graves and bring you up from your graves, O my people, I will put my spirit within you, and you shall live. And I will place you on your own soil. Then you shall know that I, the Lord, have spoken and will act, said the Lord. Now, this transformation of bones to beings shifts the setting of Ezekiel's vision from just being forgotten carnage of a battlefield with unnamed and unclaimed bodies and unknown and untold stories and histories. It transforms it from a battlefield to a cemetery where there are people that are named and known, where there's community and an opportunity for movement and change and growth. And for these newly resurrected bodies with life and breath and agency, their new life gave them permission to live in the midst of their separation and pain and uncertainty and grief and exile. And it also gave them permission to keep hoping that one day they or their children or their grandchildren might leave the valley of exile and return home to their own soil and their own people, to be claimed by those who loved them, to be called by their names. Can these dry bones live? Yahweh's answer was a resounding yes. Dry bones can. It's a message of resounding hope. And now, I find it interesting that science tells us that the way the atmosphere of the earth works means that today you and I, we are technically breathing the same recycled breath that was given, breathed in and out by those dry bones, by the first humans on earth. Take a breath, a really good, deep one. Some form of that air originated countless millennia ago. That's the breath from the dry bones. Their exhale allows our inhale. Your exhale allows me to inhale and will allow my great grandchildren to inhale. I love the way that theologian Barbara Brown Taylor explains it. She says, if you've studied earth science, then you know that our gorgeous blue-green planet is wrapped in a protective veil that we call the atmosphere, which separates the air we breathe from the cold vacuum of outer space. Beneath this veil is all the air that ever was. No cosmic plant cleaning company comes along every 100 years or so to suck out all the old air and pump in some new. The same ancient air just keeps recirculating, which means that every time any of us breathes, we breathe stardust left over from the creation of the earth. We breathe brontosaurus breath and pterodactyl breath. We breathe air that has circulated through the rainforests of Kenya and air that has turned yellow with sulfur over Mexico City. We breathe the same air that Plato breathed, and Mozart and Michelangelo, not to mention Hitler and Lizzie Borden. Every time we breathe, we take in what was once some baby's first breath, or some dying person's last. We take it in. We use it to live. And when we breathe out, it carries some of us with it to the next person, or tree, or blue-tailed skink who uses it to live. Take a breath. As long as we have breath, we can have life. We are all experiencing breath and life together. And the message of the dry bones, the breath of the dry bones, has a message for us today. We will, all of us, be or experience dry bones. And maybe that's how we would describe things right now. The never-ending exhaustion of the never-ending day-to-day when we think we just cannot set foot out of bed. The day of the diagnosis, the loss of a loved one, our chronic condition, an ended relationship, the continuing question of our own wholeness and lovability and worthiness, the recognition of our addictions, our job loss, our ongoing guilt or shame, hateful legislation, the death of George Floyd or Breonna Taylor or Dante Wright or Tyree Nichols or Darrell Williams or countless others, the fires in Maui, the refugee, our loss of faith, our depression, our worry. I don't need to go on. Maybe we look around us and find little more than dry bones. Inequality seems wider, poverty seems insurmountable, pain seems deeper, hate seems louder, solutions seem further away. Everywhere we look are dry bones. And perhaps our question of, can these dry bones live, is a question that we have rooted in justice, in a quest for justice. Perhaps you feel called to prophesy, to call upon the four winds to breathe ruach into the voiceless, to return agency to those who never had it, or to those who have had it taken away. Because if we do not prophesy to the four winds for their breath, who will? Perhaps we're plagued with questions like, was that death for nothing? Is there pain for nothing? Can nothing be done? Is it all just dry bones? Maybe it causes us to ask the question, does God really care about the hurting and the abused and those who have been and are being slain in both body and spirit? And Ezekiel's vision suggests a resounding yes. God does care, and dry bones can live. Perhaps the story of the dry bones speaks to you as someone who feels like you or your life is nothing more than dry bones right now. Maybe Yahweh's question to Ezekiel, can these dry bones live, seems a bit like a trick question, because maybe your question is not can the dry bones live, but rather should they? Should something you have worked long and hard to put to death be offered new breath? Some bones need not be resurrected. Some shouldn't be. Sometimes for our mental and physical health, some dry bones just need to stay dead in order to allow us the opportunity to walk out of our valleys and give breath to other long neglected things in our lives. And like the Israelites, perhaps you're waiting for permission to leave the valley and live. Perhaps those of us feeling like we're laying smack in the middle of all the dry bones need to hear the message of Ezekiel and be reminded of the resounding yes. Those dry bones can live. Our dry bones can live. And they can not only live, but they can dance. And we need to be reminded that we are every day offered that opportunity, and that every breath we take in itself is reminiscent of Ruach, the very essence of God within us. What can happen when we allow dry bones to be brought to life and to dance? And as bizarre and potentially frightening as Ezekiel's vision is, and it is frightening, it can be at the same time beautiful. I know I need reminding, especially during seasons when dry bones just seem to be everywhere. And the question still resounds today. Can these dry bones live? Should these dry bones live? Can these dry bones live? And the answer is yes, they can. Take a breath with me. I want to offer us a few moments of reflection, to recognize dry bones, to be offered the sometimes rare opportunity to sit, to acknowledge our gift of breath and life. And so I invite you to participate in the following meditation. Those dry bones get everywhere. In the workplaces and job centers, in the homes and high streets, in the schools and in the colleges. Those dry bones get everywhere. In the shops and the sports arenas, in the places of entertainment, and in the centers of leisure. Those dry bones get everywhere, sprinkling their lifeless dust, sapping energy and draining hope, confusing minds and sowing discontent. Those dry bones get everywhere. But so does the breath of God, and so does the hopeful life of the Spirit, gentle and powerful, rushing and meandering, transforming radically. And little by little, resurrecting, encouraging, stirring, comforting. Those dry bones get everywhere, but so does the breath of God. Take a breath. Feel the breath, the Ruach, fill your lungs. Imagine the breath spreading down to your limbs, to your fingers and your toes, giving your body life and energy and peace. Take a breath. That breath entering boldly into your lungs is from the same air that breathed creation, humanity into being. That brought life to dry bones, that allowed those bones to dance. Take a breath. Notice the feeling of being alive. Notice your bones and your muscles, their strengths and their aches. Notice the feelings of movement and of stillness. Take a breath. Where do you see, where do you feel dry bones? In areas in need of justice? Within yourself? Can these dry bones live again? Take a breath. As you inhale, be reminded that no matter where or how you might recognize dry bones, no matter how they got there or how long they might have been there, you are seen and named and loved. You are invited to breathe and to dance and to live. Take a breath.
If you would like to know more or get connected to Crosspointe, go to crosspointenc.org. If you're in need of care or assistance, go to crosspointe.org/care. And welcome home.